Good morning. This is Tracy, Hales Vass, right on Four Corners. Today I'm talking to Larry Kilham, mostly about his latest book, The Perfectionist, but he's got other things we'll talk about also. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning, Tracy.
I really enjoyed The Perfectionist and was quite taken and impressed with your father and his life story there. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of a synopsis of that book?
Well, it's about two people growing up together. It's about my father, who came from an artistic family in Boston, and he himself was an engineer, self-taught engineer and designer, and he started out making furniture during the Depression, Art Deco furniture for wealthy clients, and when the money ran out in the U.S. after the Depression, he moved into designing machinery, which he didn't particularly like, and then he started recording bird records, and that's where I became involved because I'm trained as an electronic engineer, so I could help him. I am, as I say, I was trained as an engineer, so I needed to learn from somebody how you invent and build a business, which is what he was doing through his records, and then he developed bird feeders, and I helped him along the way, and sort of we bounced off each other, swapping ideas. So in a way, it was the two of us growing up together, I the technologist and he the artist.
Well, the title is apropos because he was a perfectionist, wasn't he?
Oh yes, it drove me nuts because, and it drove him nuts too, because when I built things and designed things, I was so proud of them, but he always thought they were unfinished. And that plagued me through my professional life because I had several companies based on my inventions, and looking back on it, I realized I should have perfected them more before introducing them. I watched, and he would work for years on perfecting a design.
I think the story of him and his bird feeders is quite impressive. You worked with him on getting just the right design and material and everything for that.
Yes, that actually is the part of the book I selected to read. Would you like to hear that now?
I think that'd be good timing. Please.
Yeah, this is Chapter 9, called Inventing the World's Best Bird Feeder. One rainy day, my father was looking out of a window at a bird feeder swinging in the breeze. It had no birds on it. It was a design popular at the time where there was a small rustic round wooden log about 2 inches in diameter and about a foot long. 8 1-inch diameter holes were drilled into the log where peanut butter or suet could be placed. At the time, these feeders were very popular with people, but they were not especially popular with the birds. I knew my father was thinking about a bird feeder designed to replace the wooden log suet feeder, so I looked out with him and asked, "How's your design coming along?" He turned and looked at me and startled me with the remark, "Did you know that bird feeder sales tend to be opposite of the health of the economy?" "What do you mean?" "When people are down on their luck and have less money, they seek solace and joy from things like the feeders with their perky, colorful birds." He smiled knowingly and added, "On Wall Street, they call this a counter-cyclical play." I wasn't sure that was what my father said about bird feeder sales was true, but he was talking himself into investing time, money, and energy into his bird feeder development project. He wanted my support, and I thought a better bird feeder was much more promising financially than his records, so I agreed with him. But I knew that the tooling costs would be astronomical, and I said to myself, "Dear God, please make this a home run." Peter Kilham was starting out again at the age of 63. He was, as usual, almost broke at any age when most people are thinking about retiring. My father began to think about designing a bird feeder that would be mass-produced, yet also be a hit with the birds. The basic idea in the existing design of the vertical feeders was that peanut butter suet would be troweled into the holes of the wooden log. He observed that a greater variety of interesting birds preferred seeds to peanut butter or suet. His first breakthrough was to think of the feeder as a hollow tube holding seeds instead of a log with holes drilled in it. He found that the vertical tube design with perches at feed holes was a better starting point than the log. If it could be made of clear plastic tubing, moreover, the birds could see the seeds in it. The feeder could also be easily filled by pouring the seeds in through the top. Shining metal caps on top and bottom and metal perches would make the bird feeder both stylish and easily manufacturable. Still, the question that had to be answered was, what will the birds think of the new feeder? My father hung several bird feeders outside of his kitchen window to find out. He was determined to keep experimenting after studying the birds' reactions to each design change. He had that twinkle in his eyes when he told me, when they're dissatisfied, the birds scold. When they're pleased, their notes almost sound like applause. My father tried all sorts of things to please the birds. His choice of metal instead of plastic for the perch rods was important for mechanical engineering reasons. But would the birds freeze their little feet on the perch rods on cold winter days? There was a lot of discussions, worry, and experimentation about this. After experimentation and observation, my father concluded that the bird's feet would not stick to the metal perches. More recent bird feeder designs do have plastic perches, however. I was a consultant to a plastics product company at the time, so my expertise was called upon to deal with another problem. We needed to select a plastic for the clear tube serving as the bird feeder's body. First, I recommended polystyrene. This was an obvious choice because it is a low-cost basic industrial plastic available in crystal clear grades, such as those used for disposable safety glasses. However, we found that after a few weeks in the sun, the polystyrene was ruined. The ultraviolet energy of the sun broke it down, causing it to craze all over. We tried polystyrene with special additives to prevent this, but nothing helped. The same thing happened when we tried acrylic. Butyrate, a plastic made from cellulose, was the next candidate. It was not as readily available as the other plastics we'd tried, but it seemed more stable in our outdoor tests. Then there was the jolting discovery. The squirrels loved it. They chewed it up like candy, probably savoring the salt in it. Finally, we turned our attention to polycarbonate, often known by one of its trade names, Lexan. Actually, we were aware of Lexan from the beginning, but we were dragging our feet and trying it because it's over twice the cost of the other common plastics, and it was more difficult to process. The company I managed at the time manufactured plastics machinery, so I knew how the Lexan should be extruded into tubing. The process required much higher temperature and pressures than most other common plastics, but there was no getting around it. The Lexan worked beautifully. It was crystal clear, did not scratch easily, and was not affected by the sun, and seemed distasteful to the squirrels. The most persistent problem of the new bird feeder design was indeed the squirrels. They could shinny up the slick support poles planted in the ground to hold the feeder. They could drop down from swaying tree branches. They could leap over from almost anywhere. Peter and Dorothy tried everything to keep them off the feeder. One solution which worked was to put an old black phonograph record above the feeder for hanging feeders or below the feeder for pole-mounted feeders. The birds didn't mind the records. In fact, they seemed pleased that the squirrels were not stealing their meal. Later, there were specially designed molded polycarbonate squirrel guards, but Dorothy and I thought the records worked best. My father invented a number of bird feeders. They all used clear Lexan. he invented by imagining himself to be a bird on the perch. Then he envisioned the geometry that would be most accommodating to the bird. Only after the birds were satisfied did he select the materials and manufacturing processes to make an attractive and economical product. Imagination and creativity are highly focused in the invention process. When an inventor comes up with a truly novel idea, he or she has been exploring relationships, patterns, and associations until a productive interplay of ideas, images, and data of all kinds is found. That encouragement signals the brain that the chase is on. The mind is to be captivated in the little world encompassed by this project. I call this world imagination space. I know this is what happens because I have done it many times in developing my 3 patented inventions. On a number of occasions, my father spoke to me of projecting himself into imagination space. My father's persistence in perfecting a product has been an inspiration to me. His work has taught me that even something of apparent simplicity, like a bird feeder, is worth the full development effort. Peter always thought that the greatest error inventors make is falling in love with their design. He was always his own severest critic.
Yes, he was, wasn't he?
He certainly was.
And I thought that was interesting the way you sort of took after him, but yet he never did quite think, like you said, your things were quite as good as they could be.
Yeah, that's tough to take when you're his son.
Absolutely.
We all want to be patted on the head and adulated.
Right, right.
But it was tough love, I guess you could say.
Well, he was quite a guy. I mean, he was doing these inventions until he was in his 80s, right?
Yes, he got his last patent when he was in his early 80s.
That's impressive. Well, you are pretty impressive yourself. You're an MIT grad, but you have 4 novels, 2 nonfiction works, and a couple of memoirs, one of Nicaragua, right?
Yes, my goodness, you've been doing your homework.
That's part of my job, yep. So tell us about your novels.
Well, my novels all revolve around a theme which I originally got hooked on when I was at MIT. When I was there, I was in their graduate school. I took courses under the famous artificial intelligence pioneer Marvin Minsky.
Oh.
And at that time, artificial intelligence was just something that weird geeks got involved with, and nobody thought that it would ever lead anywhere. But anyway, I studied under the master. Throughout the years since that time, I was in many occupations which had nothing to do with artificial intelligence or engineering even, because I spent a lot of time, for example, in Latin America and elsewhere as a traveling salesman.
Mm-hmm.
But I never forgot artificial intelligence. Decided that it was one of the most important things that would be emerging to affect our lives in the future. As we now see, you go on the internet anywhere, it's all they talk about is AI.
That's true.
So I decided to write a couple of novels about it and develop my writing technique while I was at it. It was a topic that I could warm up to.
Right.
So my first novel, which was the most popular, was called Love Bite. And I got that word from 2 of my AI characters, one a woman, one a man, who were talking to each other, thinking they might actually have emotion and empathy and be falling in love, and they spoke of love bite.
B-Y-T-E.
Yes, B-Y-T-E. Actually, that novel was written about the time of Arab Spring, when artificial intelligence was used to a certain degree to break into social media for affecting the masses. And my wife and I were in Cairo about that time, and we saw it vividly. My book takes place in the U.S., a lot of it in New Mexico, where the science advisor to the president, who is a Dr. Strangelove type character, is holed up in a cave in the Monsanto Mountains. and where we used to store atomic weapons. That part's true.
Mm-hmm.
And he builds a plot to take over the country using artificial intelligence to break into Facebook and
Oh, wow.
Twitter and all of that. So I eventually evolved a trilogy out of that idea. And then I wrote 2 serious nonfiction books out of that. One of them was called The Digital Rabbit Hole, which was bringing to public attention the problems of particularly children getting totally absorbed by the internet, iPhones, and so forth.
Oh, it's such a dilemma, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other book, which got very good critical reception, and I want to probably do another version of it and update it, called Winter of the Genomes.
Oh.
And it is about the relationship between people and robots, the degree one will be doing the work of the other. And the answer is one will never completely take over from the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I predicted what they're beginning to see now, the decline in population, as women see a new job paradigm out there having to do with fewer job opportunities for their offspring. And that book has done surprisingly well since it hasn't really been promoted. And then I wrote one more novel, just came out last fall, called Free Will Odyssey, about artificial intelligence used to particularly change problems that people have, such as alcoholism.
Oh.
And our hero, a young man who invents a free will machine that interacts with you through virtual reality, found that it inadvertently caused the death of his girlfriend, who was a life scientist. So half of the book is about a trial that took place. And part of the issue of the trial was, can artificial devices be held responsible for people's deaths?
Wow.
About that time, there were 2 trials around the same idea. One was in Germany, and the other was in Boston. The latter half of the book, our hero is called as a consultant to the president of the U.S., who has an alcoholic problem, and uses our hero's device to rid himself of his alcoholism and addiction to a drug. The drug looks like the one we saw in Brave New World.
Oh, Soma.
Yes. I changed the name to something similar, OPA.
Oh, wow.
Because the U.S. at that time was totally under the control of everybody taking OPA. And the president is cured, and everybody lives happily ever after. So, but you can see that I've always been interested in artificial intelligence. Now I'm interested in exploring the relationship between the natural world and the technological world. And, for example, have we overloaded on technology? Should people be out, for example, bird watching more,
right,
or reconnecting with the natural world? This is particularly important with climate change and our sense of desperation, which will grow as less of the natural world will be around to admire.
Well, not only do these books sound fascinating, but speculative, and maybe we should pay attention to that.
I think so.
Yeah. Real issues that are facing us. And when you talk about, and the kids today, that's such a problem.
Yes, in the book, The Perfectionist, I mentioned in the very last chapter how the woman who took over my father's business remarked to me, one of the problems in running a bird products business that she and other people in her industry had found was that the new generation, the millennials, have less interest in the natural world and birds.
Oh.
Particularly as more and more of them gravitate into the hives of the cities. And they're not even sure, what birds are.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious, you're up in the Four Corners area where presumably there's not quite so much millennial influence.
Oh, you see it everywhere, though.
Do you?
Yes, you do. It's not a big city here in Farmington, but so many fewer people are playing outside.
They don't go down to the ponds and the streams looking for tadpoles.
Not like they used to. And as students, as a professor, I saw so many students just addicted to their phones.
I saw that here when I was a judge in the science fairs in the Santa Fe schools.
Oh.
And since I speak Spanish, they asked me to particularly talk to the little kids who were from Mexico who were exhibiting. And most of them came from families with no money. What they got for their exhibits came from dumpster diving. But I would ask them, where did you get the idea for your exhibit?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, well, maybe, Miss Gonzalez, the science teacher, had given them the idea. And almost inevitably, they would say they got it from their iPhone.
Wow.
They went to the internet.
Wow. Yep. There's good and bad, isn't there?
There certainly is.
Oh, my.
Just recently, the Audubon Society here in Santa Fe, this is their headquarters for New Mexico, has asked me to come out and visit later this week. And one of the things that intrigued them that I'd mentioned preparatory to the visit was some more programs to get the kids engaged with nature.
Great idea. Did you come up with some ideas?
Yes. Here's one. See what you think of it.
Okay.
Here's one I had. I've just discovered Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while I do a little post on there. And I thought, they could have a large video or computer screen display, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
in their reception area for the public. And they could have Instagrams done by the kids, not by professionals,
Mm-hmm.
of birds and other creatures that they have seen,
I like that.
to share a environmental experience with everybody.
There you're combining the technology and nature. I think that's a great idea.
And it wouldn't cost much. We could probably get the equipment donated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the kids would be much more engaged if they could point and say, look, I did that. Or,
Right. I agree. And they're really comfortable with the Instagram, so that could work.
oh, yes, it's amazing. They're comfortable with all kinds of technologies that seem scary even to me,
It does, yes. So your father had a relationship with the Audubon Society also.
Yes, that was his launching pad, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
He was back in the bird records business. And I mention an episode in the book where he took me out to the Massachusetts Audubon Society, which is one of the grand dams of the business. And he introduced me to the little old ladies who would serve him cookies and tea.
Mm-hmm.
He charmed them all to pieces. He was good at that. And they didn't wind up buying many records or later feeders, but what they did do, they clamored to the National Audubon to buy them for distribution to all the Audubon stores.
Well, that's huge.
Yeah, they sort of served as his sales force.
Great.
And they also gave him encouragement because these were tough times. He didn't have two nickels to rub together.
Right.
And so it made him feel good, feel wanted, like he had something that was important.
Mm-hmm.
The Audubon Society continued to be a booster of his. The Rhode Island Audubon Society director narrated on some of his records and so forth. And as as I say, they weren't his biggest customer, but always a very important supporter of what he did.
That's a good organization to be associated with.
Exactly.
And I'm glad to hear they're still going strong and doing well.
Yes, they just last week got approval to get a big water dump from the upstream of the Rio Grande to put more water downstream by Truth or Consequences.
Oh, great. Good.
For building up habitat for bird life down there.
Oh, that's great. Good deal. So let me take a minute and tell the audience, or let you tell the audience, where they can find your books.
Okay. Well, I'm self-published,
Mm-hmm.
and all my books are available on Amazon. And if they type in Larry Kilham Amazon on the Amazon search bar, they'll come up with my author page. Or for any particular book, the title of the book, within the Amazon search bar.
Right.
And the Perfectionist one, what works very well, I've found, is just type in Peter Kilham.
Your father's name, Peter Kilham.
Yeah, and the Amazon computer instantly takes you to the right page.
Great.
And there you'll find both the paperback and the ebook.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both good. The paperback doesn't have color pictures. The ebook has color illustrations. Which
I enjoyed those beautiful illustrations, yes.
And I have a website where you can see about all my books. I have a blog there and all the rest of it. It's at Larry Kilham, LarryKilham.net. And that will also have links to the Amazon pages as well.
Perfect.
On the website where the books are,
Mm-hmm.
look around for a link to the YouTube of my father.
Oh.
I just posted a YouTube there, which was just recently resurrected from almost the trash, a 7-minute interview with NBC in Boston of him talking about recording the birds and his relationship with the birds, and it's priceless.
Oh, that's great. I didn't see that when I was on your webpage.
No, it wasn't there when you looked at it.
Oh, well, I will go back and check it out. Because I feel like I know your father now after reading about him.
So if you go to the website and go to the blog, for example, it's right there.
Okay, so LarryKilham.net and then to the blogs. Great. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
No, I don't think so. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.
And to you. This is Tracy Hales-Vass. I've been talking today to Larry Kilham about his book, The Perfectionist, and also his other works. Thank you for listening. You can reach me at righton@sanjuancollege.edu. This is Right on Four Corners, KSJE 90.9, Farmington, New Mexico.